Late-night adult stories. Sexual desire. Love of lust. Part 4, date with David and disappointment. Today was my day off and I left the lakeside mansion before dawn. The sky was a pale wash of lavender as I slipped out through the servants' entrance. Every corridor hushed, save for the distant echo of marble under my footsteps. I carried only a small leather satchel and the memory of John's approving smile. The drive into the city was brisk. Fog clung to the freeway overpasses, and streetlights glowed through the mist like tiny lanterns in a silent parade. By sunrise, I reached David's loft, a converted warehouse with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. I climbed the wrought iron stairs and knocked lightly on the heavy oak door. When David opened it, his tousled hair and bright eyes made my heart flutter. Inside, the loft smelled of espresso and polished concrete. A row of vintage books leaned against the exposed brick. A single potted succulent sat on a low metal table. He greeted me with an easy grin and guided me to a plush armchair. "Good morning, love," he said, handing me a mug of dark roast. I inhaled the rich aroma and smiled back, grateful for the warmth of his welcome. He had planned a perfect day. A stroll through the art district, brunch at a sunlit cafe, and an afternoon jazz concert in the park. We wandered past murals of vibrant color and browsed small galleries, David pointing out pieces that reminded him of traveling landscapes. His hand brushed mine briefly, gentle but hesitant. My skin tingled, yet beneath that spark lay a soft ache, an unspoken question. Would this sweetness ever kindle the fire burning inside me? At brunch, sunlight poured through stained glass windows onto our table. We shared eggs Benedict and freshly baked croissants, laughing softly over spilled salt and buttered crumbs. David's eagerness pleased me, his careful attention, the way he tucked a stray lock of hair behind my ear. But as the meal wore on, I recognized a familiar tension beneath his shy smile. When we returned to the loft, the afternoon air had warmed, drifting in through open windows with the scent of sea salt. He led me by the hand into his bedroom, a cozy sanctuary with a low bed draped in white linens and cushions of velvet. Shadows played on the walls as light shifted, lending the room a dreamy hush. David paused at the threshold, searching my face. "Are you comfortable?" he asked, voice soft. I nodded, then felt a surge of desire I could no longer contain. I stepped forward, inviting him closer. His lips met mine in a tender kiss, gentle, exploratory. My pulse throbbed as his hands roamed my waist, but when I deepened the embrace, I sensed his hesitation. He moved with sweet urgency, his inexperienced touch brushing too lightly, too quickly. There was no slow crescendo, no rising tide of shared passion, only a brief flicker. Within moments, his body shuddered and he sank back onto the rumpled sheets, cheeks flushed with both relief and embarrassment. I lay beside him, chest heaving, hollow with regret. The ache in me was not quenched. Instead, it coiled tighter, like a spring refusing to release. David reached for my hand, apology in his eyes, but I pulled away, sliding off the bed to dress. "It's okay," I whispered, though the words felt untrue. I avoided his gaze as I fastened buttons and tucked in my hair. My heart pounded with conflicting emotions, pity for his discomfort, frustration at my own unmet need. I slipped out before he woke, carrying home a quiet sorrow. Driving back through the awakening streets, I thought of John's composed presence, of the slow confidence in his touch. In that contrast, I realized what I truly craved, a deliberate fire, one that built slowly, consuming me from the inside out. By the time I returned to the mansion, the sun was fully risen, painting the courtyard in golden light. I paused beneath the archway, inhaling the scent of jasmine trailing from the garden. My footsteps echoed softly on the marble as I crossed the threshold. No longer the naive girl seeking affection, but a woman who understood the depth of her own desire. Part 5. Return and Lingering Yearning. Dawn broke in a muted glow as I made my way back to the mansion, the world still hushed in the pale light. My heels clicked softly on the cobblestone drive, each echo a reminder of the gulf between the life I left behind and the one that awaited me here. The wrought iron gate swung open without a sound, and I passed beneath its arch as though crossing into another realm. One of marble pillars, hushed corridors, and memories that refused to let me go. Inside, the foyer was bathed in soft morning light. The chandelier's crystals, dusted with dawn's glow, scattered prisms across the marble floor. I paused to catch my breath, hand brushing the cool stone balustrade. The stillness was almost sacred, broken only by the distant trill of a tea kettle in the servant's wing and the rhythmic drip of condensation from a high window. As I moved into the main hall, my footsteps took on a steadier rhythm, but my mind drifted back to last night's disappointment in David's loft and the heated promise of John's embrace. My body remembered the unfulfilled hunger, an ache that had grown sharper when David's eagerness had flickered and died too quickly. In contrast, John's measured confidence, the way he had touched me with deliberate intent, replayed in my mind like a slow-burning flame. I passed the library doors, polished walnut embellished with brass inlay, and felt my heart stutter. Inside, the rows of leather-bound volumes stood sentinel, their spines gleaming in the muted light. I pictured John there, seated in the tufted armchair, reading aloud while I listened, every cadence of his voice stirring something deep inside me. The memory was a whisper that coiled around my senses. Turning down the corridor, I slipped into the sunroom, where floor-to-ceiling windows framed the glassy lake beyond. The lily on the water mirrored the pale sky, their petals unfurling with the morning. I rested my hand on a marble table, cool and smooth beneath my palm, and closed my eyes. In the hush, I could almost feel John's hand covering mine, steadying me, anchoring me to this place where my desires had begun to awaken. My stomach twisted as I recalled the velvet warmth of his lips against my neck, the slow pressure of his fingers tracing my collarbone. That night on the veranda had been a revelation, soft candlelight, the scent of jasmine drifting on lake breezes, and the promise of something neither of us dared to speak. The memory of his kiss, lingering, unhurried, sent warmth coursing through me even in the chill of morning. A gentle breath of wind stirred the curtains, and I followed its motion toward the grand staircase. Each step upward felt like a promise and a challenge, promise of the intimacy we had shared, and a challenge to reconcile the woman I was with the woman I wanted to become. I paused halfway up, hand gripping the smooth walnut banister, and let myself admit the truth I had been resisting. I craved him. Not David with his fleeting passion, but John, his silent strength, his measured touch, his ability to kindle a fire that burned slow and fierce. At the second-floor landing, I lingered outside the guest quarters and traced the nameplate on the door, Mary's Suite. It felt strange to see my name so formally inscribed, as though I were already part of this household's tapestry. The door stood ajar, and the first rays of sunlight spilled inside. I stepped in, inhaling the soft linen scent of my bedchamber, gauzy drapes, a carved mahogany four-poster bed, and a writing desk angled toward the window. I closed the door gently behind me and moved to the desk, running my fingers across its polished surface. Here, I had scribbled my journal entries, hopeful, anxious, uncertain. Now I felt both hope and dread interlaced. Hope that this place could answer the unspoken ache, and dread that my heart might lead me into danger. A soft knock came at the door. My pulse quickened. Had John come to speak with me? I smoothed my skirt and opened it a crack to reveal his tall silhouette. "Good morning, Mary," he said, voice low and comforting. "I hope you rest well." His presence was like a lighthouse in fog, steady, unwavering. I managed a small smile. "Thank you, Mr. John." He stepped inside, hands clasped behind his back, surveying the room with a measured gaze. "I trust the arrangements suit you?" "Yes," I whispered, voice thick. "Everything is perfect." He offered me a warm look before shifting his gaze to the window. "The lake is particularly still today. A perfect morning for tea on the terrace." My breath caught. Tea on the terrace, an invitation laden with promise. I nodded, stepping aside to let him pass. As we walked together toward the staircase, I felt the ache in my chest settle into a determined pulse. The day stretched out before us, and I knew each moment beneath this roof would bring me closer to understanding the fire within me. But for now, I was content to follow his measured footsteps, letting the echo of my own desire guide me back into the depths of his silent strength. Part 6. John's Bath and Rising Desire. The late morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the servants' corridor, turning motes of dust into drifting stars. I was carrying a stack of fresh white towels, their cotton fibers still warm from the linen room dryer, when I heard it, the soft symphony of running water, echoing from somewhere behind polished marble walls. I paused, towels tucked under my arm, and let the hush of the hallway settle around me. The air felt thicker here, lingering steam that wafted through a slightly ajar door. Intrigued, I stepped forward, careful not to make a sound. The door led to a bathroom fit for a palace, floor-to-ceiling slabs of Carrara marble veined with pale gray, a deep soaking tub carved from a single block, and gilded brass fixtures that gleamed like molten gold in the light. On a pedestal nearby, a crystal decanter held lavender-scented bath oil, its rosy hue glowing in the sunbeam. My breath caught. I had come to retrieve more towels. Mr. John always insisted on fresh linens, but the sight before me stole any will to move. He was there, emerging from the mist like a classical statue come to life. Steam curled around his broad shoulders, tracing the lines of muscles honed by age and discipline. A single towel was wrapped low around his hips, secured with a loose knot on his right side. Water droplets clung to his skin, shimmering as they slid across his chest and over the sculpted planes of his abdomen. Time slowed. My pulse hammered in my ears. I felt the warm flush of blood race to my cheeks and the tightening of desire coil low in my belly. Every detail imprinted itself on my senses, the way his hair clung wet against his forehead, the subtle ridge of collarbone beneath taut skin, the faint scent of eucalyptus from the oils he'd used. I stood frozen, toes curling slightly in my flats. He moved with graceful calm, stepping onto a marble mat and reaching for a linen wrap hanging on a bronze hook. Muscles rippled under his skin in a slow, mesmerizing wave. I swallowed hard, my head swimming with thoughts I dared not speak. This was my employer and my benefactor, yet in that moment he felt wholly, tantalizingly different. He glanced up, as though sensing my presence. Our eyes met in the mirror's reflection. For a heartbeat, neither of us spoke. His gaze was gentle, tinged with amusement and something softer, an unspoken invitation. My breath caught and I felt an ache of both longing and guilt. Sorry, I managed to whisper, stepping back as the towel settled around his waist. The linen was damp, clinging in places, and I knew I looked flushed, sleeves of my uniform bunched in my fists. He offered a small, understanding smile. "No harm done, Mary." His voice was low, warm, steady. "I'll be out shortly." His words hung in the silent room as he turned away, closing the distance between himself and the door. Steam billowed behind him, the rich scent of lavender and cedar falling like a haunting melody. I exhaled a shuddering breath and backed out, colliding softly with the doorframe. My towels tumbled to the floor in a muffled thud. Heat burned in my cheeks as I bent to gather the fallen linens. My mind raced. I had no right to glimpse such intimacy, yet I couldn't regret what I'd seen. In that reflection, I had witnessed not just a body honed by time, but a man whose strength and quiet confidence stirred something deep inside me, a yearning both new and profoundly awakening. Once I collected the towels, I fled down the corridor, my heart a frantic drumbeat. I could still feel the echo of his gaze, the memory of a silhouette glowing against the marble. I paused outside the kitchen door, pressing my back against its cool wood, and let my breath settle. My pulse slowed, but the embers of desire continued to glow. I smoothed the towels and carried them into the kitchen, every step measured. The sunlight here felt too bright, too revealing. I poured water into a basin to rinse the towels, the simple act grounding me. Yet beneath that calm exterior, the memory of John's bath lingered, an undercurrent of heat that refused to cool. At the breakfast table, he greeted me as if nothing had happened, his voice the same courteous tone. "Good morning, Mary." He offered me a warm look, and my heart seized. I forced a smile and set out a new cup of tea, the steam rising in gentle spirals. All day, I moved through my tasks with practiced ease, but my mind drifted back to the marble bathroom. I pictured the steady strength in his stance, the slow grace of his movements, and the way his towel rode low enough to tease a glimpse of the line where hip met torso. I felt the ache of wanting to feel his hand on my skin, wanting to measure touch I had only ever glimpsed. As evening approached and lanterns were lit in the hall, I found myself drawn to the bathroom door once more. I checked my reflection in the hall mirror, my cheeks still flushed, eyes bright with something I could not name. I straightened my apron and slipped away, intent on retrieving the bath oils for him. Inside, the room was steamy and dim, lit by a single sconce. The crystal decanter waited on its pedestal. I uncorked it, inhaled the lavender-spiced aroma, and clutched it to my chest. My pulse thudded in my throat as I realized I was holding the very elixir that had shrouded him in that dreamlike haze. I set the decanter back and backed out of the doorway, leaving the echo of my longing behind. The promise of that reflection of the slow burn that could only be kindled by his deliberate touch would haunt me through the night, igniting a fire that would demand to be sated. Part 7. Midnight Embrace. Over the next few days, our interactions felt electric, each glance and courtesy touch brimming with unspoken desire. I found myself lingering in doorways, my pulse quickening whenever John's steady presence brushed against mine. In the sunroom, I caught him tracing the rim of his teacup with a thoughtful gaze. In the library, I watched him reach for a book, his forearm flexing in a way that made my breath hitch. Part 7. Midnight Embrace. Over the next few days, our interactions felt electric, each glance and courtesy touch brimming with unspoken desire. I found myself lingering in doorways, my pulse quickening whenever John's steady presence brushed against mine. In the sunroom, I caught him tracing the rim of his teacup with a thoughtful gaze. In the library, I watched him reach for a book, his forearm flexing in a way that made my breath hitch. Every moment together carried an undercurrent of anticipation, but neither of us spoke it aloud. That evening, a soft rain began to fall, pattering on the veranda roof like a whispered lullaby. Lanterns were lit, their golden glow pooling on the slate floor. I prepared a tray of herbal tea, mint, and chamomile, his favorites, and arranged 2 crystal tumblers beside a low teakwood table. The air smelled of wet jasmine from the garden and cedar from the eaves above. When John stepped out, he was dressed in a casual cashmere sweater, sleeves pushed to his elbows, revealing strong wrists. He offered me a reassuring smile. "May I join you?" he asked, voice low and warm. I nodded, my heart fluttering. He sat opposite me, tea steaming between us. We spoke in soft tones, trivialities about the weather, the lake's rising tide, but beneath each word lay a current of longing. Candlelight flickered in his eyes, and I felt my cheeks warm. When I lifted my cup, our hands brushed, lingering longer than etiquette required, and the spark between us ignited. He set down his cup and stood, extending his hand. "Come," he murmured. "Let's walk." We moved to the railing and stepped onto the veranda, the rain gentle now, cloaking the world in silver mist. I shivered, and without a word he draped his sweater around my shoulders. His warmth pressed against me, steady and reassuring. We stood close, listening to the rain's soft rhythm, sharing the silence. Then, as if drawn by a force neither of us could resist, he turned me in his arms. His gaze held mine intense, unyielding, and my breath caught. He brushed a strand of hair from my face, his fingers grazing my cheek. I closed my eyes, savoring the light touch. Our lips met in a slow, searching kiss, soft at first, then deepening as the tension we had carried for days poured out. The world around us dissolved. Only his arms, only the taste of his mouth, only the steady beat of his heart against mine. He guided me toward the French doors that led back into the house. Inside, the parlor was quite save for a single candle's glow and the patter of rain on windows. He pressed me gently against the wall, his hands moving with purposeful tenderness, one hand at my waist, the other cradling the back of my neck. I felt his breath warm against my skin as he kissed me again, slower this time, memorizing every curve of my lips. "Mary," he whispered between kisses, his voice rough with emotion. I felt a tremor of want ripple through me. "I've wanted this for so long." My pulse thundered. I reached up, threading my fingers through his silver hair, pulling him closer. Our bodies pressed together, warm cotton against flesh, the soft rustle of his sweater in my ear. Each caress was deliberate, a conversation of skin and size. I felt the slow climb of heat between us, a tide rising to a crescendo we both craved. He guided me across the room to a chaise longue draped in velvet. As I settled back, he knelt before me, his eyes never leaving mine. His hands glided beneath the hem of my silk blouse, revealing the smooth hollow of my waist. My breath caught at the gentle exploration, his touch confident, laden with promise. He paused to look up at me, a silent question in his gaze. I offered a nod in invitation. He stood and slid the blouse over my shoulders, the fabric whispering against my skin. His fingers trailed over my collarbone, down the slope of my breasts, skirting my core. I arched into him, knee pooling between my thighs. The restraint in his movements, no rush, only attentive precision, made each touch electric. He leaned in, planting soft kisses along my neck, each one a spark lighting the path to deeper desire. Clothes discarded, we came together in a melding of limbs and whispered names. His lips found mine again, slower, more insistent, as our bodies moved in tandem. Every sigh, every gentle gasp, resonated in the hush of the room. Time stretched and contracted, measured only by the rhythm of our union. We explored each other, hands mapping curves, mouths memorizing textures, until a wave of release swept through us both, leaving us breathless and entwined. Afterward, we lay tangled on the chaise, skin slick with shared warmth. Candlelight flickered across his face, illuminating his satisfied smile. He brushed a damp curl from my forehead. I traced the line of his jaw, marveling at the depth of emotion in his gaze. "I've never felt anything like that," I whispered, voice thick. He nodded, pressing his forehead to mine. "Nor I," he replied softly. "You've changed everything." I curled closer to him, heart full and mind quiet for the first time. In his arms, I felt the ache in me resolved, no longer a restless hunger, but a gentle glow of contentment. The slow burning passion we had ignited under candlelight had fulfilled me in ways I had only dared imagine. As the storm outside subsided to a hushed drizzle, I drifted toward sleep between his arms, safe in the knowledge that this midnight embrace had awakened a new chapter in both our lives, one that would demand courage, trust, and the honesty to follow our hearts wherever they might lead. Part 8. Michael's Return and First Glimpse. Late afternoon shadows stretched across the driveway as a sleek black SUV glided beneath the wrought iron gates. The lake beyond shimmered with copper light, and distant gulls called overhead. I was arranging fresh lily in the foyer's vase when I heard the engine's polite growl. My heart fluttered not with fear, but with something else I couldn't name. I straightened my apron and stepped into the grand hall just in time to see the door open. There he was, Michael, returning from abroad. He stood tall in a navy suit cut precisely to his broad shoulders, a crisp white shirt unbuttoned at the collar. His dark hair caught a stray beam of sunlight, and when he lifted his chin, I saw eyes that were both familiar and utterly new, warm, assessing, alive with purpose. "Welcome home, Michael," his father's voice rumbled from behind me. Mr. John stepped forward, extending a hand that Michael shook with a firm, confident grip. I watched their greeting with rapt attention, the easy clasp of fist to fist, the slight bow of Michael's head, the genuine smile that curved his lips. Never had I seen him so assured. He turned, catching sight of me at the top of the marble staircase. For an instant, his steady gaze met mine, a flicker of recognition, of something unspoken. "Mary," he said, voice smooth, with just a hint of surprise. He strode toward me, each step measured, like a dancer rehearsed in poise. My pulse kicked up as he reached the landing. He offered his hand, palm up. "Allow me," he said, in a tone that left no room for refusal and swept me down the final steps. My fingertips brushed his, and electricity crackled between us. Below, the foyer felt suddenly smaller. Rich textures pressed around us. Velvet drapes, polished mahogany, tiles of ivory and onyx underfoot. I noted the slight calluses on his palm as he guided me, the warmth beneath his tailored sleeve. He led me to a bench beside the piano. "How was your trip?" I asked, managing a steady smile even as my throat tightened. "Long," he replied, voice low. He removed a leather duffel bag and set it down with precise care. "But I've missed this place." "And missed you." My breath caught. The words hung between us as sunlight fractured through the chandelier, dust motes dancing in his gaze. He took a step closer, and I felt the irresistible pull of his presence. "My father told me you've been a great help," he continued, eyes flicking to the paintings lining the walls. "He speaks highly of you." I felt a flush of pride and something darker at the genuine warmth in his words. His attention singled me out in a home where every detail was meant to impress. I nodded, uncertain how to respond. "I hope we can talk more tonight," he said, voice low enough that only I could hear. "There's so much I've missed." I swallowed, mind racing. The promise in his tone stirred a tempest of excitement and guilt. I thought of John, the steady kindness in his eyes, the promise of midnight that still pulsed through my veins. Yet here stood Michael, his confident stride and warm gaze beckoning me toward uncharted desire. He lifted his bag, pausing before turning away. "I'll settle in," he said, "then join you for dinner." With one last look, one that claimed more than courtesy, he strode down the corridor leading to the east wing. I stood frozen at the foot of the stairs, hearing only the echo of his footsteps. My pulse thundered as I realized how quickly my world had tilted. The mansion had always been a stage for John and me. Now Michael's return premiered a new act, one laced with intrigue, tension, and the dangerous allure of his experienced charm. I pressed a hand to my heart and whispered to myself, "What have I done?" Yet beneath the question lay a thrilling promise that this night, only hours away, would change everything. Subscribe and hit the bell to get updates on new story episodes.